Every year around this time, we are faced with perhaps the single most annoying, aggravating, and in recent years, dangerous time to be placed on our yearly plate of things we never used to give a second thought. In this case, it's all about the millions of Americans who will board a plane, hop onto a train, get into their cars, and leave behind the mundane for summer vacations, 4th of July holiday. And whether those timeouts are taken a mile from home or on the other side of the world, they are no longer merely about being certain you have that extra set of socks or the right bathing suit for the beach. The new paradigm is centered smack dab on security. And as Turkish officials put a fresh coat of paint on airport terminal walls that were splattered with human remains this week, Americans are demanding to know what their government is doing to keep them safe, especially when it comes to air travel. But when those in charge are wasting so much of your hard-earned tax dollars, why should we for 1 second believe they can keep us any safer than the people in Turkey? We'll see if we can get some comments in here. 1-877-Newsmax, 1-877-639-7629. Be ready to opine if we need you. But let's dig in first and check in with the president at Citizens Against Government Waste about this very item. Tom Schatz joining us right here on the Hardline. Joining us, let's get right to work here. The Porker of the Month, Department of Homeland Security Secretary Jeh Johnson, for failing to take sufficient steps to eliminate the nightmarish lines at TSA airport checkpoints across the nation. All right, I'm going to play on this one, Tom. Is it really all his fault? And how does he manage to become Porker of the Month when he basically has got all this government regulation on top of his head that, quite frankly, I don't know if anybody could handle?
It's not that difficult to get this fixed. It's total mismanagement, bureaucratic ineptitude. The secretary said that they've been authorized to hire more people for the summer, but that probably won't change the amount of time that people will be waiting on these lines. The pre-check program that was set up by TSA was supposed to have 25 million people by now. It only has about 3 million. They don't plan well, they don't execute, and they're just a huge prime example of mismanagement. And as the secretary, Jeh Johnson is responsible, whether he started it, whether he made it better or worse. He's the one that needs to take charge, go up to Congress and say, I need to do this to get rid of those lines. Instead, he's relying on the old tired excuses. He's even blaming the passengers, saying they're not ready to go through the lines, and they're causing the problem. That's really all you need to know.
When he, though, goes to Congress, and much of what you said is absolutely true, and as a frequent flyer, I can tell you that I've experienced it as well. But when a guy like Jeh Johnson goes to Congress and asks them for help, are they listening is the next issue, because I still hear a lot of people inside the Beltway who says Congress, basically, when they see Jeh Johnson coming, they run. They want to get out of the room right away because they don't want anything to do with it either.
Look, he's asking for more money, but he's not asking to get the problem fixed. He's not creating the plan. He's not creating the atmosphere to make sure that there are sufficient TSA agents waiting when there are a lot of people and only a few people when there aren't a lot of passengers. Everyone knows that the busy hours for air transportation are usually early morning, late afternoon. So you have more TSA agents, more lines open. And we've all been there where there are these huge lines and there's only one place to go. And then maybe after you get through the line, after an hour or so, they start opening up other lines. It's just inefficient. 22 airports around the country have decided they don't want to use TSA agents. They privatize the security. They still have to abide by a lot of the rules, but it's run much more efficiently because if somebody doesn't do the job for one of those companies, they get fired. That doesn't happen with TSA.
Tom, honestly, I want to know where you find a 1 hour line, because I want to get in that line. Because quite frankly, a lot of times...
I haven't flown for a year, that's why.
See, that's the problem. It's an hour and a half or 2 hours these days. Hey, earlier this month, Johnson said he knew that security wait times would increase, and he opted for more security over expediency. Here's what he said.
We are not going to compromise aviation security in order to expedite wait times, in order to shortcut wait times. We're going to keep passengers moving, but we're also going to keep them safe. So beginning last year, we began to really take a hard look at aviation security and refocus our efforts. And we knew then that it would lead to longer wait times for a lot of travelers in the busiest airports.
Tom, is it really just a matter here that, as many people have talked about with the TSA, with DHS, with all these different agencies, we pick a defense, the terrorists look, they get time, and then they go ahead, they figure out a way to get around it. that maybe what's happening here is there's a lack of imagination, and it's simply speaking, as in a lot of cases, the terrorists are ahead of us, and we're not using everything we can to get ahead of them so that we can make it more secure, more expedient, and at the same time, at least give people a break from these hour-long lines. I guess I'm trying not to blame everybody here, throw that baby out with the bathwater here, because it seems like the killers are always ahead of us.
Well, there's no question about that. But in terms of security, tests were done to see what kind of weapons could get past TSA agents. 95% of them got through. So it's not really so much a matter of security, it's a matter of inefficiency. Airports around the world, and obviously the terrible thing that happened at Istanbul is something that shouldn't happen anywhere, and nobody knows if that was security or, again, the terrorists are ahead of what's going on. But look at Israel. They have security outside of the terminals. They're extremely careful about how people get in and what they're allowed to bring in. Really nothing happens over there. There are ways to do this to make us as safe as possible, but not wait for 2 or 3 hours to get on a plane. Bring in more agents, open more lines. Don't have one line when there are people waiting for 2 hours. And I think that's really more of the problem than whatever they've changed or not changed in terms of security that they may or may not be telling us about. And maybe if they explained it a little better, people wouldn't be as upset about having to stand there. But there's no justification other than, hey, you got to wait. We're going to get more agents, but you're still going to wait. That doesn't really help.
Is it just possible that we go back? Look, the Department of Homeland Security is now more than 10 years old. I mean, we're talking about they had to consolidate 22 pre-existing agencies. They report to about 100 congressional oversight committees. They're trying to strike that balance. Is it just possible that the Department of Homeland Security is in itself a massive waste, that you've got to break up sooner or later, and it would be better off if it was back to being individual agencies?
Well, no question about that. People have talked about that in terms of reorganizing the government. That would be one of the first places that everybody would look. It is a huge job. There's no question about it. I don't envy Secretary Johnson for having this job, and he's been put in some very difficult positions, and to the extent that they do keep us safe, they've done a good job. But this is not really that difficult. This is something that happened at airports for many, many years before September 11th. You went through a line, you got checked in, you got on your plane. It didn't take that long. Yes, things have changed, but get things to work so that the job is done. And you don't have, by the way, a ton of people standing around, which is also not a good thing in terms of security itself.
Or you have people basically who are calling out the TSA. You've got employees there who are whistleblowers. They say that they're being bullied by management there. And if you whistleblow, you're out of a job right away.
That's, again, another problem throughout the government, the whistleblowers and people talking about what needs to be done. And they're usually the best people. They like their jobs. They want to keep their jobs for the most part. They know what isn't working. Should be more responsiveness to what they're trying to do. But again, we can rely on what's happening in other countries. Canada also has privatized security. Let's see what's going on that works. Let's adopt that rather than sticking with what clearly isn't working or talking about what we need to do in terms of creating more security when 95% of the weapons that have been tested go through. That's not very secure.
And here's the money, people. TSA's fiscal year 2016 budget, $7.3 billion, is $1 billion and 16% higher than it was in fiscal year 2007. And something else, 103 of the TSA's 48,000 airport screeners quit each and every week, which means they got to go back in and they got to retrain people. And again, it starts these ridiculous lines. The porker of the month is well stated. By the way, learn more about how your government wastes your money. Pay attention to the porker of the month by learning about this. Go to cagw.org. Tom Schatz, always a pleasure, my friend. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Let's add a couple of other notes here as well. Because when it comes down, and this is about your tax dollars at work, and I don't know how many of you are going to be traveling this holiday weekend and traveling for the summer, but there's a lot of people out there who simply are afraid to go into airports. Think about this, and this comes down to the conversation with the Department of Homeland Security and TSA. TSA's full-time workforce rose by 4.3% over the last 10 years. That's 10 years. And major air travel actually decreased in that same 10-year period. To date, 22, and this comes from the CAGW. To date, 22 airports have dropped TSA, and they have switched to the more, to them, cost-effective, flexible, and effective private alternative. I don't know how many of you have been in lines here in the last 6 months or so, but they're getting stunningly ridiculous. American Airlines estimates that since February, long lines at Chicago's O'Hare Airport led to 4,000 passengers missing flights. The questions, I guess, are, how safe do you feel? Does the TSA make you feel any safer? Do you feel better when you get on a plane and think that there's less chance something is going to happen? Or quite frankly, even with all this money being spent, do you have less confidence in your security getting on a plane? And remember, this is your money. Don't worry, we'll get to all this soon. Stick around, because the most interesting man in television and radio is up next. Curtis Sliwa joins us as we close out a short week here at the Hardline.